Right, we are live. Welcome. My name is Lorenz, and this is our Creator Conversation series from Sutra.co. And today I'm really excited to be with Kosha Joubert, who is the CEO of the Pocket Project, where she works closely with Thomas Hubel on offering different programs and trainings. And before that, Kosha was really closely involved with the Global Ecovillage Network, doing a lot of amazing work there. And Kosha, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Lawrence. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you all.
And I'd love to just start just by maybe having you tell us a little bit about the work that the Pocket Project does.
Well, maybe I can start actually, just with the work that I did in the Global Ecovillage Network, which
Mm,
in a way to network and also help create healing biotopes around the planet where people come together and live in ways that regenerate nature, regenerate social relationships, regenerate culture, even regenerate economic systems to really heal the world that we are a part of on a community level. And while doing that work, I realized that there were certain aspects that we couldn't solve. And it kept feeling, and I feel this in many of our endeavors at the moment to meet and respond to the multiple crises that we are facing as humanity, that it feels as if the good intentions are slowed down by sand in the system, you could call it. And this came up really around each individual community, that within the communities, over time, it felt as if the communities reached the ceiling of their development, where they weren't developing further. They were stagnating on a certain level of great places, but not continuing the evolution as freely as one would expect or wish for or feel should be possible. And the other aspect was on the global level of the Global Ecovillage Network, really noticing the the sand in the system, which I would today call the trauma of the past, of humanity's past,
mm,
the big issues of racism, colonialism, enslavement, and how this, because we had equal representation from each of the continents and beautiful practices. It's one of the best organizations, I think, in terms of the equality of engagement. But the level of truly thriving together was hard to reach because there was so much that needed to be worked through, the messiness of really working through the pain of the past. And we did not have the tools to do that well. And this is something I see replicated across institutions in the world. So that's when I shifted and I felt like um, I would like to focus on the sand in the system for a while.
mm,
The Pocket Project is doing so, focusing on the, I would say, one of the most hidden variables in our societal realities, individual, ancestral, and collective trauma, which is by its very nature hidden and comes out as symptoms, but it's hard to really look at the origins and clean them. It needs commitment. And put in short, I would say that the Pocket Project aims to create pockets of healing that become able to address and heal pockets of trauma. So it's
mm,
also deeply infused by the understanding that none of us can do this work alone, that individual, ancestral, and collective trauma are deeply intertwined, that we are interbeing, and that our nervous systems, when connecting and coming into resonance, we become able to host more intensity, stay present in moments of crisis, overcome the tendency to polarize in moments of tension, and become able to digest and integrate ground and truly restore aspects that need to be looked at.
Mm.
So that's what our work is about. And we're working, as you said, very closely with Thomas Hübl and a whole network of people that have been learning with him over many, many years. And yeah, it's exciting work.
Mm. Thank you for sharing that. You're just reminding me why I love this work so much, and particularly this insight around this, the invisible dimension of what you're calling the sand in the system, the trauma aspect, which is something that also has really become much more clear to me over the last few years, and just something that is a big source of inquiry for me around how to work with that online. And I'm curious, in your experience, particularly since the pandemic hit and pretty much changed, everything, as far as in-person programs in particular. But I'm curious about your reflections on, doing this kind of work online, and how that's been for you with the Pocket Project.
Well, the amazing thing is that it's partly helpful, because um, you know, I think one of the main ingredients that we bring to the work, so there's one very important aspect is that we get to know, as Deb Dana says, we befriend our own nervous systems.
Mm.
We get to know our own nervous systems. We start noticing much more precisely, where am I in flow in my life? Where am I contracted? How, how does this free movement of energy, how does the sand in my system hinder the free
Mm.
movement of energy? And where are those invisible, absent places that I can't quite feel, but then they suddenly pop up as an emotional, yeah, where I feel like this is not really me, but I'm just exploding at my partner. Something he said triggers me so much, and I can't help myself. Or, we feel that we run recurrent patterns in our teams, our workplaces, so that we really wake up to those aspects in our own lives and our own systems. And, trauma often still carries a stigma that we are ashamed about the places where
Mm.
we're not who we would like to be. And we try to hide it from ourselves and from each other. So
Mhm.
I think at the heart of our work is also this shifting from a deficiency model of us as human beings to a place of honoring and compassion and really understanding how intelligent our responses are and how well we are doing, seeing where we are coming from, how much we're doing our best, also in those moments where we're triggered. So to bring that softness and compassion to ourselves. And why I'm saying all of that, is just to also honor that the pandemic has created more space for us to be with ourselves, as
Mm.
it has brought us back into our more intimate spaces. It has allowed many of us to stay with ourselves a bit longer and see ourselves a bit more intimately. I know this has also for many caused mental disease, but I also believe it's caused a lot of an increased level of self intimacy. And from there, if we can build the networks of mutual support where I can really reach out for support when I need it, I believe that's great. Also, what that's brought for me particularly, but not only for me, is a return to the land where I live. I was traveling for more than 50% of my time across the world before the,
Mm.
and I've come home to where I live. I'm growing vegetables and plants. I've connected in a much more deep way with the ecosystem around me, really nourishing the ecosystem, but also being deeply nourished by the web of life that I am a part of here. So I'm much more deeply rooted in place. And then the third aspect is that one of the main tools that we work with is our ability to resonate with each other. So the ability of my nervous system to, in a way, mirror, we all have mirror neurons, but that we're constantly mirroring the rhythm, the energies that are flowing through the nervous system of the person that I'm with. And because we haven't been taught, we do it naturally as mothers or fathers with our babies, for instance, or when we're with a very sick person and we're trying to comfort them. We naturally attune our nervous systems to their nervous systems and naturally adapt the rhythm of our nervous system to the rhythm of the nervous system of a baby, a 3-year-old. That's natural. But we don't consciously use it when we're speaking to a colleague, that we just take a moment to attune to their nervous system and actually start resonating on a deeper level so that the communication can actually flow from a deeper space of coherence, of mutual sensing. And that is something that we have surprisingly found works really well online for people to practice. Because a lot of the everyday distractions fall away. We can see each other's faces quite clearly. It's not the whole body experience that we have in a room, but it's astonishing how much resonance and coherence can be built in online spaces. And if we think, like what Thomas says, is that our potential as human beings is that we would feel when we go to bed in the evening, even if one child on the world is hungry. That is the potential of our nervous system. And that doesn't need me to see you. Our nervous systems can sense the world. We can sense each other. So we could also say that Zoom is like or whatever platform you use. We obviously use Zoom because I've just spoken to it. I'm doing a little advertisement here for Zoom unwillingly. But that we're using that as a step towards our natural capacity for global telepathy and global compassion that lies dormant in us. We're not completely dormant, moving in us more than we know.
Yeah, thank you for your reflections here. And this is a subject so close to my heart, particularly around cultivating this capacity for resonance, for truly feeling a person. And I almost find in the process of introducing people to this, that there's two aspects to it. One aspect is a process where a person discovers that there's a there, that, oh wow, there's this thing there where I can actually feel a person and be felt and be aware of that. And then of course the second aspect is the expanding of that capacity, the practice of it. And I'm curious. So there's a couple of things I'm curious about. Is maybe to have you share a little more about this concept of what you're calling coherence, and also to have you share a little bit about your approaches towards I guess I know the word I want to use is like teaching this, but it's not quite teaching. I don't know what it's introducing people to something that's innate, and then creating an opportunity for them to expand that. So I'm curious about, but I'm going to use the word teaching. So I'm curious about your experience teaching this capacity to people. So yeah, coherence, and how do you teach people this?
Yeah, so, just I would love to add one thing to the little row of improvements through going online, and that is the diversity, the global diversity in our course. And kind of people we're able to reach online. And of course, there's a huge technical divide in the world, which is part of the systems of injustice. But it's wonderful that we're able to work with people from 70 countries in our current trauma-informed leadership course, for instance. You know, it's amazing that we're able to have 110 people from the Ukraine in the war zone engaged in the course. You know, that is amazing possibilities that are open. So, yeah, in terms of, you know, maybe the word education means drawing forth within. And even that, you know, it's like a remembering together of these skills. And we call it cultivating the community of practice, because it's practices that are innate to us as human beings, but that in our Western culture over the past decades and centuries have been also, I would say, because of increased levels of traumatization. If we look back through history, there's like an archaeological layering of collective traumas that one on top of the other, without humanity having gained the skills to actually digest and integrate and restore the pain that was caused, the transgression of sacred law. So we're sitting on a big compost heap of collective trauma. And as all compost heaps, this heap has an incredible potential. If it could be fully digested and put back into the soil, it would be very, very fruitful for the next layers of evolution of humanity. It would, you know, post-traumatic learning is like an incredible increase in creative energy, and deep ethical learning also that we're missing at the moment. Yeah, but in, you know, so we're sitting on this, and the systems that we've developed haven't taught us the sensitivity that is needed to address it, because of the need in order to survive to protect ourselves from the intensity of what is there, because we're not yet able to integrate it. You know, if you just look at the suffering of enslavement, or the intensity in there, or of the Holocaust, you know, if we would really look at the suffering within, the intensities of such a dimension, the human suffering, that we are not yet able to embody that, feel it, feel it, digest it, melt the ice that surrounds it. Yeah, so developing communities of practice that soften on the edge of that iceberg and develop our skill set of increased presence, increased spaciousness in the face of intensity, capacity for self-regulation, capacity for co-regulation, understanding how coherence within myself leads to coherence in my relatedness. You know, becoming aware of when am I related, when am I not related, and to speak, you know, to say what is coherence. You know, we just had a little conversation before we started this conversation about parts within us that might be in conflict with each other. You know, so that is incoherence within us. And I might have one part, like I do have at the moment, that is doing a healing cleanse and really changing my food intake, because I feel like I need to up my physical capacity to allow energy to flow through. So I'm doing a healing cleanse, and at the same time, other parts of me are crying out for comfort foods, and you know. So I have a little conversation going on within me, maybe. That can be very incoherent, where I am polarized within me from binge eating to fasting, you know, and it becomes a very unhealthy movement in myself. Or I could build an internal dialogue with these different parts where I listen deeply to their needs. And there is in a way, we might call this a witnessing self or a very present part of me, a higher self that um, becomes able to host the conversation, to witness what is happening within me, and bring it into a relationship of mutual understanding and a more beautiful flow between them where one isn't beating the other up, if that makes sense. So we have so that is an increased coherence in myself. Another example I could give is if my body is feeling very tense in this moment and my emotions are very fearful. And at the same time, as a leader, I'm trying to look in control of things. And, that creates a message of incoherence that goes out through my voice, through my words, through resonance to everybody who listens to me. And I actually create a small wave of incoherence as I speak, which will be felt by others. We feel so much more than we know, and once we start practicing these, we start looking at that, noticing, maybe I just take another breath. I allow that little edge of nervousness to be felt more, and then I land more, and I become more one as I speak. Just that small movement can be very helpful. And we can do the same in collectives. So listening to different voices coming up in a collective, feeling into the roots, often ancestral roots or collective roots that the voices come from. Give them a space to be heard, and we see them then, if more awareness is brought, more hosting awareness is brought, more safety is created, more compassionate listening. We see how parts in a collective can, in a way, relax, find their place, feel heard, start actually having a dialogue instead of a polarized conflict. And that is building coherence. On a nervous system level, I believe that we will have much more scientific research also around this. It's already been researched, like levels of coherence in the human brain, for instance, that lead to different levels of ability to think or to sense and think coherently. But also levels of nervous system coherence that enable us to start digesting together. In many indigenous cultures, they use music, rhythm, dance to create that kind of coherence in a group, where we consciously feel part of something, or we are always part of something, but we actually come home to it and allow energy to move through. And this can be a healing process of listening to the conflict in the group and seeing what does it want to tell us. Yeah. So that's what I would say about coherence.
Thank you, Kosha. So many directions we could go from here. You've used the word digest a few times, and I wonder if you could speak about that. The mechanics of that in a group, and what is the difference between, so I'll notice, for example, in my personal practice, things will come up, and I will, become present to them, feel them in my body, and that's one way of processing and integrating. But then there's something that opens up when there's another person involved. In that same process, when it becomes another person involved, somehow there's an increased capacity for what I imagine you mean when you say digest. And I'm wondering about, what is that? Why is, I guess, to add a nuance to that, I know you have a I don't know exactly what to call it, but you have something called global social witnessing, which is very much along this thread of, the function of witnessing. And what is it about this function of witnessing that that is so, that does this, that performs this digestive process?
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful question. I notice every time you ask me a question, I immediately think of the individual collective interrelatedness.
Hmm.
And I tend to always start here. So I'll start here now again. Just with, just as we need to digest our food well, it's very important that we learn to digest our experience well. And trauma basically is undigested experience, which was too intense to be digested in a moment, and so needed to be parceled off, you could say, for future digestion. And these become like, I have a personal experience, for instance, of a near-death experience as a child, where I realized a little while ago how much I was still in that loop of dying.
Hmm.
At that moment where I was dying never stopped because it was so intense and I wasn't fully met in that place to really release it again. So a part of my nervous system was always in that. And it got easily triggered. And it was not a place I could address and reach alone because it was so well parceled up. I needed therapeutic support, you could say, or long years of work to actually access it and feel my nervous system literally letting go in that deep place of a 3-year-old, which is not even accessible through my
Hmm.
ratio. So that's one form of digestion. And I would also say on the level of everyday hygiene, we all live in a world which is increasingly showing us the crisis that is at the heart of human existence in many forms of external crises that we're facing. And there is a strong speeding up effect, also the hyperactivation and the apathy that is caused when external challenges hit our traumatic patterns. So many of us find ourselves also in that maybe even polarization between exhausted parts and hyperactivated, very
Hmm.
fast working parts. And our lives are intense. Especially these past years, I don't think there's any one of us who has not been touched by tragedy in our circles. Um, yeah, I notice it touches me as I say that. A moment of compassion for humanity, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so, I deeply believe that each of us needs the daily practice of creating space in our lives where we have a time to be, not to do, but to be, and to allow the experiences of the day, whatever is happening, to land again. This is like an internal digestion process. So I personally meditate an hour a day. Other people, I also do yoga. You might go for a walk in nature. When I'm a young mum, I might spend that period actually with my baby, but in closeness and intimacy, not doing but being with my baby. So
Hmm.
there's many. I can spend it as a CEO, being with my colleagues instead of listening to them, but taking a moment to actually listen. That even offers moments of digestion. So it's really coming from doing to being, from busyness to spaciousness, that allows digestion to happen in our nervous systems in many different ways. And it happens, our nervous systems are very intelligent. As soon as we offer space, the digestion starts. Now, many of us maybe haven't done this for a while. So when we sit down, there's a lot that wants to be digested. And it can feel as if we're sitting on our meditation stools and are being followed by a hound of dogs, wanting to get, it can be like frightening to stop, And there might also be phases where more intense contents come up and it becomes intense to take space and allow it. And then there are times where it's easy and flowing, and I just feel like, oh, there's a bit of digestion. And then as soon as more has been digested, more inspiration can start landing again in those moments of quietness. But I would just like to bring these first, because that's really, before we go into digesting on the collective level or with others, I believe that this inner part, and then also taking care of myself when there's intense content coming up, that I go and find the support that I need to be with it. We were not meant to face the intensity of some of the pain we probably all went through during our childhood. We've all had really painful experiences, and we were never, our nervous system is not set up to digest that alone. I come from South Africa, and we have the saying of Ubuntu, I am because you are. We've always meant to do this together. So, that we really allow ourselves the vulnerability of needing support, needing others. And to speak to the global social witnessing, this is William Ury, who wrote the book Getting to Yes and founder of the Harvard School of Negotiation. He calls it the third side and speaks of the importance in any negotiation process in the world to have the witnesses. And how we use the global social witnessing is to build a layer of embodied witnessing of global events. So that currently the news of the world is overwhelming. Many of us watch our social media and the media regularly. And many of us turn away from it because it's too much for our nervous systems to digest. So many of us also process it on a mental level only, and transform it into activism and sometimes also hopelessness, depression, where there is a mental response. And what we're looking for in the global social witnessing is to relate to a global event, again, as I spoke before, how we would invite to relate to each other, to relate to a global event, to the experience that people are having, that nature is having, that animals are having within a global event, whether this is a wildfire or a war situation or a shooting in a school, that we relate to that not on the level purely of information. That may come also, and it's an important ingredient, but that really the level that we go to is the level of embodied sensing or resonance. You could say building a level of coherence with it, where I allow my body to be informed, as Thomas would say, where the information leads to my body sensing what is happening, the actual experience. And from that comes a natural compassion. towards the event, which sends back, it's a bit like if we don't believe that we are in a global body of humanity, which is a space of interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh called it, it might be hard to grasp this, but it has been shown that, for instance, I know there's scientific data on this, that if a group of people meditate regularly in a city, that violence and criminality actually lowers over that time. Or that if many people pray and send best wishes to a person who is ill, that the person heals faster. So we know those things. But that we can actually bring that kind of global social witnessing presence to a global event, so that people feel palpably that they are not alone. And of course, if we can do this in an online space, as I said before, we're on the road maybe to unleashing our capacity for global telepathy. But at the moment, Zoom spaces where people who are experiencing, like we just had our last global social witnessing call, was with 5 people from the Ukraine in the war experience, speaking to their experience, their everyday experience of being in Kiev. And, a group of, I think we were 450 people, being with them in that experience, holding a space. And it has a deep impact in that moment, a sense of we are not alone, we're not just numbers, we're being witnessed. People acknowledge fully, are willing to spend time being with the pain that we are experiencing. And that has an incredible healing effect. It brings back hope. It brings that sense of I'm not alone in this. It's like a child running back to its parents. I mean, this is a completely different layer, but just, that we can offer that space of protection and, hey, it's okay. You can rest now. We're here. We can feel you. We know this. We're with you. And then also from that space, we can often come to more informed restorative action. We can find more informed ways of responding in a tuned way. So, yeah, that's a short description of global witnessing, which we have, just for people to know, we have open calls every month that people can just sign up to if you want to have an experience of this. And also on our website, we have a video with Thomas in which he gives a beautiful introduction to global social.
Amazing. Yeah. So this is pocketproject.org, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Do you have an example of a specific activity that you might use in an online space? You mentioned kind of processing things not just mentally, but in an embodied way. What's an activity that you might offer to a person or a group online to navigate that, to invite this kind of embodied presence?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I spoke before about communities of practice. I would say we really begin by just having a first informedness about what is trauma. Because it's such an invisible and also stigmatized phenomenon that it affects us and our lives greatly. Yet we often don't speak about it or don't want to address it. We'd rather speak to the resourcing and the power and the hope and the where are we going next. It feels much more powerful, and we're afraid that our power might slip away if we also address those more vulnerable and hidden parts. So the first thing is to maybe listen to experts to indigenous elders to others. So I just want to invite people to the the Collective Trauma Online Summit, which we run in partnership this year again. The last years we've had over 100,000 participants. So it's really just wonderful free content to come to and listen. I just be inspired by it. And then as we start building the community of practice, we do very simple introductions to just what is presence, what is synchronizing my body, emotions, mind. How do I train my witnessing capacity? How do I watch my capacity to host? Or where is that edge of my hosting capacity where I need to start self-regulating? How do I harness my resources to bring to those moments? And a very simple practice is the I feel you feeling me practice. So the beginnings of co-regulation, where I consciously notice my nervous system, noticing your nervous system, and respond to it. And I start, consciously experience, there's a conversation on the nervous system going on here while we're having a conversation on a verbal level. And just offering some space to that. And I practice sensing you before I start speaking to you. Sensing into a situation, sensing into a team. I might practice like conversations with a group of friends. Can I sense who has something to say next? Who would love to say something? Can I facilitate that? There's so much, practicing my own life to sense, what is wanting to come in next. You on the horizon, but also what is wanting to show up in my unconsciousness next. Because there's something that my body is wanting to tell me. So there's loads of stuff, it's like just unleashing the incredible potential of this beautiful, beautiful system that we call our body and we call our nervous system, but actually it's an amazing, Thomas sometimes calls it biocomputer, but I would say it's a universe, that has gone through millions of years of evolution. I sit here as I speak, so unleashing more of the potential, the hidden potential of us. And what is very helpful is to have people who've been practicing this for a while introduce us, because it's as if we need to be reminded again and again. So we'll sit, say, with Thomas sharing about how information arises between us, not in us, sharing collective field. And it'll spark a lot of recognition in us. But then we'll go into the next group setting and we'll just shift back to, what we were taught at school, how to look at each other as separate beings, and we'll see each other as separate, sometimes irritating other beings, instead of, focusing on the field between us. So we need to keep coming back and be reminded in this work. That's what we call the community of practice. So we have many ways of inviting people to join the community of practice. We literally have practice groups in the field, which is local groups of people meeting regularly and practicing very basic skills around this. And then we have online community calls each month, the Global Social Witnessing calls. We also had a series of international labs where we address certain areas of collective trauma, geographic or thematic areas over longer periods of time. We're currently digesting and in training for the next cycle of labs. So, And we're offering collective trauma integration processes, which is, one-off events, usually with Thomas in certain areas. So we just had a big event in Germany looking at polarization in German society, how to honor and start looking at the collective trauma under personal, ancestral, and collective trauma underlying that polarization, so that a much deeper level of dialogue can emerge. And actually, so we also offer trainings, like the trauma-informed leadership training. We'll also offer a training on global social witnessing facilitation next year. But all of this is like building the community of practice on different layers. And what we're developing right now is more consultancy and supervision and mentoring for people as they want to bring trauma-informed guidelines and practices to their organizations, to their communities, to their work in the world. And again, it needs that practice in a community, and also sometimes reminders by people who've been doing this for a longer time to guide us and support us as we truly ground this in our lives.
And just as we're coming to the end of our time, one more question, around doing this kind of work, and particularly wondering about your experience with this online, is what have you learned about how to respond in an online space when something gets activated? I know I participated in one of Thomas's courses last year where there was something really big that got activated, and it kind of almost lasted a few sessions. And I've also been in other spaces and some that I've hosted where something just erupts, and often around racial issues, for example. And I'm curious, what have you learned about how to either create a container that can better hold something like this, or when something does and get strongly activated in the space, what the best response might be, particularly because this is where I think there's a big difference between in-person and online. In person, the physical presence, there's a certain natural container to it, and online, when you have a chat stream going off 1,000 miles a second because people are so activated, and then there's the Zoom call, and so the situation can feel a little less manageable. And I'm curious if there's anything that that you've observed that you're now integrating into how to work with that.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it's important to start with the ingredients. So, really having enough information about what is trauma, how does it show up, how does it erupt, what are those eruptions, so that we learn over time to recognize it more and more. And it was interesting watching you as you spoke about it, because your body had a very natural expression. And where every time you spoke about the eruption, I won't be able to copy it, but it was like your eyes went a bit and you went.
It's an explosion.
Exactly. That's such a beautiful, such a beautiful expression of exactly what happens. It erupts, and we all. There's a movement of dissipation in the group. Like when something erupts, there's a fear that gets triggered in just about all of our nervous systems. So it's a trigger point for everybody that's present in that space. And the more training we've had around self-regulating and co-regulating, the more we are able to be with it in an embodied way. So again, the same skills are just so super important for it. And And as you say, especially at this time, the big systems of oppressions are finally crumbling. We are finally starting to look, humanity, at the past. So we are in this active anti-racism movement. And that means for people like us, like you and me, that we muster our dedication to being in messy spaces, to allowing that to come up. I So there is also a willingness to really acknowledge our not knowing, our the necessity for us to hear from the other side. How is this for you? What is happening? What is happening for you right now? In the Pocket Project, we usually have spaces where white-bodied Western people are the absolute majority, and then we have people from other cultures there as well. And, that doesn't feel like a safe space if you come from a history of racism, of suffering from that. It's, and, to learn how to create affinity groups where people can feel safe to express fully their experience in more similar groups, whether this is a Jewish affinity group or a global majority affinity group, BIPOC affinity group, a white affinity group, where we look at, wow, what is alive in me around that, and how can I change? Because as we move towards truly multiracial, multicultural, global spaces, we want to learn, and we want to start digesting the scars that racism has created in all of us, whether we're white or, there's deep scars that run in us. Like, I grew up under racism in the apartheid system in South Africa, and I stood up and fought against apartheid, and still that system is insidious in my body, and I need to look at it directly and watch, have deep conversations with my African friends, to meet it again and again. And what we're meeting there is not just the individual aspects, but the ancestral and the collective aspects of racism, of colonialism, of enslavement. So it's big stuff, it's hot stuff. And this is also why we say, this is not something to play with. It's intense, and it's very important that we stay at the edge of what is healthy for us. That we really learn to watch our own nervous systems, that we keep coming back to ourselves again and again and again, and watch what is happening for me now, what is triggered in me now, what do I need now, so that I can help host an explosion, as you call it, in a collective space, and not add oil to the fire, or if I am adding oil to the fire, that hopefully there is enough guidance there, a big enough team that can support my oil becoming compost for the process. Because it's also that we feel so much shame for the oil that we bring, fire that we bring. We feel a lot of shame for it, and that is a deep part of the process. So to speak very concretely, we, like in the German process that we did, we had 30 therapeutically trained assistants present in the offline space. And we have the same in offline space. It was a group of over 400 participants, 30 therapeutically trained assistants. And that starts creating a safe space. For indeed, in the online spaces, you do not have a space in the main space to address it. And you need to have a movement between large group process, meeting in smaller groups, and then also having meetings in what we call tea rooms, or one-on-one sessions, where people are supported in grounding and integrating what has come up for them. And it's really in that whole process, we also have triads that, groups of 3 that are shaped and support each other through a process. So all of this helps. And you need those different formats for the nervous system of each person who's in that person to be able to keep, opening up new content, digesting, looking at, digesting, integrating, grounding, post-traumatic learning, opening up to the next piece of content. And then we do that same in circles, the same thing for circles, triads, affinity groups, and then as a whole system, we are really learning together. We're really learning. And the beautiful thing, we because it's very hard to show the impact, to measure it scientifically. And the beautiful thing of this last project we did, the process in Germany, and we're now very keen to run more of this, is that we worked hand in hand with the Kinefen Center of Dave Snowden and SenseMaker, the software that they've developed, where you can gather narratives and experiences of people at different times of a process. And that offers you, like we collected 650 narratives before, during, after the process. And that gives us statistical data, but also in-depth qualitative data about what is happening on an individual level throughout the process, but then also amalgamating it to see collective patterns emerging. And, we had, for instance, collective patterns emerging where when people self-allocated their stories to, I'm less hopeful or I'm more hopeful, that they're more hopeful after the course, or I am more focused on the polarization to I am more focused on the understanding of the different voices. That you can track shifts that take place, and we start being able to measure cultural change processes, intercultural change, and that I think is very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kosha. I mean, what I'm really hearing is a message of really learning together. Creating a structure for a system that can really see itself and sense itself. Of course, by having each of the individuals in that system see and sense themselves and each other, and yeah, and I feel from the bottom of my heart that this is the work of the future. This is the work of the present, so that we can have a future. But this is very much the path of restoration and healing and global transformation. And yeah, I'm just really grateful to have this conversation with you, and so grateful for the work of you and Thomas Hubel, and everything it's brought to my life. I mean, so much of what we do with Sutra is about creating learning spaces that invite this quality of presence and witnessing and digestion, as has been the term that has come up today. So yeah, thank you for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and I want to just, extend my gratitude also to Thomas, because this work is so deeply inspired by him, but also to the broad network of people who have been learning and walking, bring a lot of experience to the field of Thomas. Very professionally trained people who have been learning for a long time and are part of the Pocket Project teams of facilitators and trainers and assistants, and just so much gratitude to huge amounts of voluntary work that is being given to this, and our vision of spreading the knowledge in the world, and for a world that is more built on post-traumatic learning than on traumatic repetition. Yeah, and also to you, Lawrence, and to Sutra. It's been lovely having this ongoing conversation, and also a partnership, emerging partnership between Sutra and the Pocket Project. So thank you for everything you do in the world, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Kosha. I'm sure we could continue this conversation for hours, so to be continued. But
Thank you.
thank you so much.